hi, Peg.
We're delighted to have you with us and to hear your story. We know parts of it.
You know some parts.
I know some parts, yes, and then we're going to be surprised by other parts.
So might be.
Let's begin with a little background on what happened before you entered the convent in, what year was that?
1950.
1950. So what went on in your life before 1950?
Plenty. Well, no. When I entered
school.
the world, my mother and dad, Charles and Leona May, and I was born in Monroe, and I was the second of 4 children. The other 3 were brothers. I never had a sister.
How lucky.
Oh, yeah, and I kept begging for a sister. If you couldn't, I said when Jack was born, if you couldn't get a girl, why'd you get any? Anyway, I didn't know all the ins and outs of that at that time. And so from there, we lived in Monroe until I was in 4th grade, and then we moved to Maybe because my dad was transferred. He was working in First National Bank in Monroe. In fact, that's where he met my mother before they were married. She worked there, he worked there. I don't know, we used to tease him, what'd you do, write shorthand notes to each other?
Cute.
But then he was transferred to the bank out in Maybe, so we moved to Maybe. And that was my first introduction to the Adrian Dominicans. It was interesting because I came from St. Mary's School in Monroe, the parish school, with the big classroom as regular, and out to Maybe we had 3 classrooms, 3 grades in each classroom. Well, 2 grades in the first, and then 3, 4, and 5, and then 6, 7, and 8.
And 1 room.
Yeah. So there were 10 in my class. So it was very interesting, but I loved Rose Geralda. She was my teacher in 6th, 7th, and 8th.
But who did you have at the beginning?
At the
IHMs?
I had IHMs at Monroe, right. So that's an interesting thing because when 8th grade time came and we were thinking about high schools, there's no bus and everything, you know, for Maybe. So my parents thought it would be good if I would go to St. Mary's as a boarder, but they didn't have room for me. Now the rest is history.
Oh, what a loss for them.
Well, it happened. My uncle, who was a priest, my mother's brother, said, why don't you go to Adrian? So we came here and I went to St. Joseph Academy.
Oh, you did?
And then, you know, it was a great experience for me. I thought I got a very fine education. And then, you know, it happened. All of a sudden I felt, well, of course I felt the call probably when I was a junior, but my mother and dad were not too anxious about hearing that.
But you were a boarder?
I was a boarder, from Maybe, right. And, you know, I thought that, I love Sister Marcella. She was my favorite in high school. And, you know, I did quite well, and I thought, well, I'll ask if they would ever take me in. And they did. Excuse me, they did. So, so it looks like the providence of God works along the way here. And so my novitiate was kind of...
Before we get into your novitiate, what about your brothers?
My brothers...
You kind of left them behind.
Did I leave them behind? Here. I shouldn't do that. I had one older brother, Joe, and he died when he was 39, and he had 6 kids. And it was a hard thing on the family. It was cancer. And then my next brother, who was a little bit younger than me, died last August. And now Jack is not well.
No.
In fact, I'm dealing with that today.
I know you.
But he's celebrating his Jubilee on Saturday, we hope. So it's tough. He has had so many problems. But anyhow, so we got along well as a family. But before I go into high school, I should say that the summer before my 7th grade, my mother got a call, was asked probably by my dad, who was working at the bank, if she would come and substitute because the person who was working had to leave. So she went and substituted, and it lasted for 32 years. She was a great substitute.
Isn't that something?
Right. So that left me kind of in charge of the house because, we didn't have any nannies or anything like that. And that's when I started learning to cook. So that was kind of before I even went to the academy.
Right.
And then when I was home in the summer, I did all of that. So it was a great experience for me. Sometimes I didn't like it.
And what about your brothers? Did they like you as cook?
Yeah,
And
no.
thought
They
it was your-
didn't. They didn't like it because they didn't like me being the boss. In fact, Jack would say, "Who's the boss around here? You or me?" Me. So it was, but I had to be in charge. Joe was he was out doing his own thing all the time, and so I was kind of holding things together. And I was only like 11 or something, and we didn't have anybody come in and stay with us. But my dad would come home at 11 for lunch. My mother would come home at 12 for lunch. They could check on us. And we didn't even have a phone at that time if I had an emergency.
You really date way back, don't you?
I do. Well,
That's
you're
funny.
right. But then anyhow, after all that, and the academy,
Yeah.
and my novitiate was insignificant. I mean, I don't know any big thing, that
Who was in charge of the novitiate?
Sister
at that-
Edmund and
Edmund.
Sister Rita Marie.
Okay.
And so I made profession in 1951. And from 51 to 61, I went to 4 different schools. And I didn't teach the same grade twice.
I noticed that.
It was terrible. It was very, so I never felt confident as a teacher. I wanted to, this year it was 7th grade. The next year it was 1st grade. Then it was 1st and 2nd. And it was that every year. I never taught the same grade twice in, following consecutive years. But at that time I was working on my master's at Siena. And the summer I was taking classes, and something was scratched out on my schedule, and it put in place of it teaching high school English. I said, "That's fine. Now what?" So I didn't pay much attention, to be honest with you. And yet, when I got my card, I was assigned to Hoban to teach English. And there, I felt more confident in teaching because I did it over and over, and I taught 4 classes of freshman English. Well, I'm doing that, you kind of get used to it.
In a big community too.
Big community.
Yeah.
And so there were lots of experiences that were valuable to me, learning how to get along with everybody, and just with the girls, I loved working with them, and so I was there for 5 years, and then about April of 1966, Sister Mary Louise Wald, the musician, came to me, and she had been at a council meeting. We were in provinces at the time, and she said, "I'm not supposed to tell you this, but you're going to be transferred at the end of this year, you're going to be transferred, and you're going to be made principal of St. Antonina's School in Cincinnati." Oh, well. So I went to the library, and I looked up the school, and I almost passed out. 930 some kids. Excuse me.
A grade school.
A grade school.
It was a grade school.
A grade school. Excuse me. And what was interesting about it was no kindergarten or 1st grade, because they went to public school because our schools were so full.
Right.
Well, I was not happy the first year. It was very difficult, this whole superior principal thing.
You were both.
I know. And by the next year,
taking care of those 3 boys must have.
Well, I had a lot of
prepared you.
experience,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Especially how these boys act up,
Yeah,
and they didn't get away with much. one time I threatened to go to his house and wake him up because he came late every day to school, but I never did it. Excuse me. And the thing there, it was right after Vatican II, and so there was unrest among the sisters and among a lot of things. So at the end of that year, there were probably about 3 of them who left. And so I got a new crew the next year, it seemed, and it was a very good crew, excuse me. And it just brought more life to the place. They were younger. I mean, I'll tell you some of them, Mary Jane Lipinski, and Kathy Shantz, and Bernie Lapata, and Fran Downey, and some of the, and so, it was much better. And then the next year, I think it was, Phyllis came. And Phyllis came with a new idea that she was taking her master's at Eastern, and she was learning a new technique for teaching reading. And she was going to teach 3rd grade, and she asked if she could incorporate it. I said, go with it. Well, before long, it spread. It was, the teachers just ate it up. They could see the value of it because it took the kid where he or she is and moved them. They didn't have to all keep up with the same pace.
In the group bit, yeah.
It was, they may work in small groups, 3 or 4, but when this one's ready to move on, he can move on. And so it was a very different approach. She did a marvelous job, and people were just, the rest of the faculty really liked it, especially the lower grades. So that was a great advantage. And I stayed there for 6 years as usual, but I don't know the year, but it was the year of chapter. I went in to see the provincial, Sister Ellen Marie, and asked if I could be relieved of the superior job. And I did not get a positive answer. It was too much. You related to 30-some faculty members, and then you come home and you have,
Because at
it
that
was
time,
so different.
there were very few lay teachers. It was mostly the sisters.
We'll see, but I had about 20-some lay teachers.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Oh, yeah, because we had, 3 or 4 classrooms of each grade, and there were only 10 of us at the house. So it was a new experience that you had to relate to at both. But anyhow, then that summer we had chapter, and you could call in, and I called in. Superiors are to resign.
Yeah.
Great, did I celebrate. It relieved you so much of, you tried to be one thing in the house and another thing in the school, and it just didn't work. But that was a good experience for me. I had to start taking administrative courses because I didn't have any. I had gotten my master's in guidance and counseling. So after that, I took a year. Both Phyllis and I went to Blessed Sacrament in Toledo, and I did counseling half day, and I taught religion half day, which I was very poor at. And so we got a call from Sister Julita, who was on the council, and asked if we would come and open the academy, the lower grades. Anthony's Montessori was ready for 1st grade. There was no 1st grade at the academy. There was only 6th, 7th, and 8th. And so that was my next venture. I was the principal, and Phyllis taught 1st grade, and Deb Keller was her student teacher. Some kid said one day, I finally figured this out. Sister Loretta is the boss, and you're the worker, he said to Phyllis. I thought, oh, these kids, they're so wise. But anyhow, I was there for, till 1980, and I had a call one day to come and meet with Catherine and Carol. And I didn't have any idea what that was for. I'd even read the bulletin that was out at the time to see what openings there were. Nothing seemed to catch with me. So they asked me to be treasurer. Well, that was the farthest thing from my mind. I
But
just
look at it, runs in the family.
well,
Your mother and
yes. Well, that's what they said
Yeah.
to me. Your mother and father are bankers. I said, yeah, but you get this by osmosis, you know. And another thing, I had just, here I had just finished all kinds of administration, and now I hadn't even had bookkeeping. Probably I didn't. I don't think I had it in high school. So I thought long and hard about that, but I said okay, and that was another stint, a new experience, learning new things every single day.
Were your parents alive at that time?
Yes, yes.
Well,
they were. My mother and dad were so proud of me. They thought it was the greatest thing on earth. Oh yes, but anyway, so I survived that, and I
how
think
long were you in
I
the
was
Convent?
I was there until '87, I think,
87.
and you got my history there. I think it was '87, and actually I was finished with. I thought I was finished when Carol's term was finished, but Nadine asked me if I would stay on, and so I stayed on 1 year. And decided in December it was time to go, and so it was a good move.
And so who was finance director after you?
Well, they had a real different group of Pat Leonard was first because she was assistant treasurer. Then Ann Fallon was for a time, and eventually they got Mike Flaherty.
Okay, so that's
Yeah,
when Mike came.
it took a little transition. But the experience was great. I mean, it was something new. It was kind of a hiatus from education, but then what did I do? I went right back to education because at that time my brother was at Gilmore, and they were opening a lower school.
Now tell us what Gilmore is.
Gilmore Academy is a private school in Cleveland. Grade school, high school, well, they had acquired this building it belonged to them on the same property, a lovely building, and they wanted to open a lower school. And so Phyllis had gone there in December 1 year, and then Joan Christie joined her, and they opened the school, but they didn't have an administrator, and so I just kind of fell into place there. So I stayed there for, I don't know, probably 8 or 9 years, maybe 8 years. And it was time to move on because at that time my mother had already died. My dad was getting older, and I thought, well, it would be good to be close to home. And so I moved to Farmington Hills, not knowing what I was going to be doing, but at least I had access to 275 and could zip home if I needed to. Well, I don't even know for sure if I got a call from Fran or what. But I was writing my resume at the time and stuff because I thought I have to get another job. They need the money here in the congregation. I know, we have to keep doing this. And I got this call, and so I went down for an interview, and then I took the job as associate superintendent.
Schools.
And I loved it. I loved it. I worked with a lot of different schools, working with the principals, and it was kind of just everyday stuff to me. Because I knew all the problems that they would face because I had gone through them myself. And so
you certainly responded to many invitations, and some of them totally unprepared. Were you?
some of them, most of them.
I think some
seemed-
things we are innate with, but it's certainly openness to the Holy Spirit. Certainly.
It was. I said in my autobiography, as you look back, I look at the providence of God, kind of leading me. I mean, it wasn't much of my own initiative, but it was more the providence of God.
So as you look back and think of one or two mentors or many significant people, but sometimes there's a few that stand out. Who would you name as?
Well, I loved working with Fran. I was worried because I'd been kind of my own boss for probably 20 or some years, I don't know. I mean, not totally, but I was quite independent in my position. And I thought, I am going to be working for somebody else now. And so, but I never in this, I was there 8 or 9 years or something, I never had a problem. And another person down at the office that I admired greatly was Jeannette Wheatley, a laywoman. She had been a principal at Cody High School at one time. That woman was marvelous. And she had had so many experiences, and it was so beneficial to talk to her about things because she had seen it all. And she knew a lot about Detroit, which helped me too because I sure didn't know much. So, but then I started seeing the handwriting on the wall at the Archdiocese, and I could feel some rumblings. And I had been working part-time for about 2 years, and I thought, this is over. And so I left. And so I retired, just like that.
Really?
Well, I was 75, I think. And I was on boards. I was on different committees and boards that I was on. So it wasn't that I was without something to do. So everything fell into place, I felt. I was really lucky.
Or very in tune with yourself as well.
And kind of what the needs were.
Yes.
If the need was there and I felt able to fill it, I thought, well, I'll give it a try. So it kind of worked out.
So you've been many places. Are you able to pick out the most significant ministry and why, just in a sentence?
No, well, probably the work at Gilmore.
Yeah.
Because, it was a rather sophisticated area.
Okay.
And we had to make it work. And it was something new for the area. And I wanted to facilitate the work of the teachers as much as I could to make them good teachers. We had a marvelous staff. Joan Christie came and Pat Stelma, and Phyllis and I lived together. And so we had a very, they kind of were core faculty for me. And then, the other lay teachers filling in. But we worked together really well. And, we had to kind of constantly think of new things to do because you just couldn't go along,
You had a very creative group.
We did, but and the expectations of the place were high. So, but I think we did quite well, and that I felt that I did my best and got the thing off the ground, and it's still going. And now it's not doing as well, but it was same thing with the academy.
Exactly.
After years. Debbie eventually became principal. Debbie Keller, who was she came as a student teacher and stayed there and worked all through in all different positions and became principal. And then, about 3 years later, it closed. It was hard for me to see that because I had gone there to school. I had a lot invested in that. My education plus working at the academy.
But there comes a time.
Oh, I knew.
We know that.
I was resigned eventually. I looked, when I first heard it, I thought, how could that be? That's been our congregation has depended on that for members. How many? You listen, she went to St. Joseph Academy. I mean, from years back. What's going to happen? No. God has his plans and we have ours.
And the wonderful ministry that's going on there now with the Literacy Center. Exactly. And it reminds us of, we're not going to get into this, but Walsh Hall. For those of us, Walsh Hall, we won't get into that story.
Right.
But that's a loss for many of us.
The time has come.
The time has come. What gives you energy and purpose at this time of your life? You just moved here to Adrian.
Well, it's been a kind of a rough few months. My brother died in August. Then right after that, we moved here. So that was, and I hadn't expected Chuck to die, so that was hard. And then we moved on Halloween. We flew in on our broomsticks.
No,
and
Loretta.
right, I know. Anyway, so, but you know, I love it here. I think you know the opportunities are so. I mean, you just can't even count them, and so I feel that if I get around to it, I could start doing something, reaching out. But we've had so many. You know, Jack was sick, and then Phyllis's 2 relatives died, and then so it's just been one thing after the other. So it's been a tough few months.
So you have to take it day by day.
Exactly.
And, you know, raise your hand when you can if
That's
you want
right.
to.
I'm still on the Camilla Madden Trust. I'm a trustee on that. But other than that, I'm not on any boards or anything anymore.
As you look back at your life, and many of us have connections with you at different times, is there something you'd like us to know about yourself that we might be surprised because we never knew it?
Well, I don't know. Probably you didn't know I love to cook.
No, I wasn't.
But see, I started that when my mother went to work. I started, you know, having to fix meals even when I was young. At least I got started, and then she finished them up when she came home. But it's always been something I love to have company and have a nice meal.
Okay, I'll give you my phone number.
Yeah, I know, right? I'll put you on the list.
How would you like to be remembered?
Well, certainly when I was in an administrative position, I liked to try to facilitate the teachers or the people in the finance office, their work. So it would, you know, to help them, that they wouldn't run into problems that they didn't need to. Though that would be something I would be able to do. And I think it worked out. So I felt that I worked well with the faculty or with the, you know, the office people. I felt that that was a good thing I was able to do.
So you were available, but you were able to let go once they knew what they were about. But they knew you were.
Right, they knew I was there. The interesting thing was, I knew I wasn't able to teach after my early experiences in grade school. But I could facilitate. Or if somebody came up with an idea, I could help them put it into action. Those were the things I could do. And I think that worked out. So.
Well, Loretta, I tell you, you are a treasure.
I'm a treasure.
You're
All right, I was treasurer, not.
You are a treasure, and you were in our finance office. But that's probably our relationship that some of us have.
Yeah.
But I also know you've been a tremendous educator and been involved in the whole education. And in the Archdiocese of Detroit, you were smart to leave when you did, probably.
You're right. I knew that.
Yes, and what a blessing Fran is, and we certainly all realize that right now. But in the name of the congregation, I thank you for your service and your presence among us now. You bring, you and Phyllis, your being here, you just bring a calmness and a sereneness, and you know what, we've done what we can, and we're here now, and we're enjoying life, and know that we certainly will keep your brother in our
please
prayers.
do, because things are tough.
And may you have an enjoyable Saturday celebration with him.
Yes, I hope so.
Yeah. So
Thank you so much.
Loretta May. Who were you?
Ann Elizabeth.
Ann Elizabeth. Okay, Sister Ann Elizabeth.
Right.
Okay,
How nice.
thank you.
You're welcome.